Are we? Okay.
Take it away, Steve.
All right. I'm going to begin by sharing my screen briefly because I found this cartoon that I thought was apt. Um, it says, "Sometimes I feel old and useless. I mean, biologically, we've outlived our usefulness. We've reproduced and reared our offspring. What's the point of our existence now?" And the grandmother says, "Someone's got to spoil our grandson." So I'll stop the screen sharing, but I thought that was a cartoon version of the grandmother hypothesis. So I'm very briefly going to summarize what the grandmother hypothesis is, and then a couple of comments from an article that I read in Scientific American um, that talks a little bit about the role grandparents may have played in human evolution more broadly than just the grandmother hypothesis. And I thought the easiest way to describe the grandmother hypothesis was to be very concrete. And let's picture two mothers and their respective children in a hunter-gatherer tribe sometime in the Pleistocene era. So let's call them Mother A and Mother Z. Mother A, her mother is still alive. So there is a Grandma A in this tribe. But Mother Z's mother died young. So there's no Grandma Z around. So Grandma A helps Mother A find food for her kids. Mother Z has no such help. So the A kids are going to survive better than the Z kids. And therefore, that grandmothering increases the fitness of Grandmother A's progeny and also her own inclusive fitness. Help from Grandma A also allows Mother A to have more kids more often. As a result, Grandma A is going to have more descendants than Grandma Z, rather, who I said died young. So Grandma A's genes for longevity begin to proliferate in the population, leading to increased lifespans in general. Not only that, but grandmothering also may have contributed to the large brain size of our species, because brain size is related to the duration of brain development. Brain size is correlated with longevity, in other words. The bigger the brain, the longer the lifespan. So the theory goes grandmothering led not only to our long lives, but to the big brains we have today. There's some criticisms of the grandmother hypothesis, and I have them listed, but I'll save them if and when we get into that aspect of it. But the other article that I wanted to mention, and I think I can post the link to it in the chat. Let me try. Yeah, I just read that yesterday, and it's a fairly lengthy article, but to summarize, the author, who is an anthropology professor at Central Michigan University, she cites four ways in which grandparents may have helped human evolution more broadly than just the grandmother hypothesis and longevity. The first one is that grandparents transmit cultural knowledge, knowledge about the environment, knowledge about technology, such as tool use, cultural knowledge, such as rules and tradition. Secondly, grandparents reinforce social connections. They tell stories about the past and about ancestors, which encourages the formation of complicated kinship systems and other social networks. Third, grandparents accelerated the pace of evolution via increased population size. She says that it's common sense. More people mean more mutations, and therefore more opportunities for advantageous mutations to proliferate in populations as their members reproduce. Large populations also accelerate cultural evolution, and that's a positive feedback loop process. More people results in more cultural change, which in turn results in more people. And lastly, increased population size and large populations are major drivers of new behaviors. Large populations lead to complex systems of cooperation, trade networks, diverse expressions of individual and group identity. And I'll read one sentence towards the end of her paper that summarizes her point of view. She writes, quote, "The hallmark features of the Upper Paleolithic, that is the explosive increase in the use of symbols, for instance, or the incorporation of new materials in tool manufacture, look as though they might have been the consequence of swelling population size," close quote, which was a result of longevity, which was a result of grandparents. And last comment is that grandmothering and grandparenting can be thought of as a subset of alloparenting, which is a larger idea of parenting being provided by anyone who is a non-parent. And I came across a recent study at Cambridge that found that infants receive, that was a study of hunter-gatherers, and researchers determined that in those hunter-gatherer tribes, infants receive attentive care and physical contact for about 9 hours a day from an average of 15 different caregivers. Some of those caregivers are siblings and older adolescents. They're not all adults. And this one is relevant to anybody who has lost sleep due to a crying infant. A mother's support system in those hunter-gatherer tribes responds to more than half of the baby's crying episodes. So I will stop there with that preliminary information and toss it open for a discussion about the grandmother hypothesis in a more narrow sense, or grandparents and their role in evolution and even in our modern society more generally. And I understand that Ken developed a new system where we raise a finger if we want to continue to make a comment about a topic that's already under discussion, and a hand if you want to change the topic to something new. Do I have that right, Ken?
Yes.
Okay.
You put your
Okay.
electronic hand, or
I can't see Jane or Barbara, so if you want to participate, you'll need to somehow let me see that you want to say something. Yeah, Diane.
I think this is on the same point. I'm not sure. We'll see. The reason it's called the grandmother hypothesis rather than the grandparent hypothesis is because it originated in the puzzle of why there's menopause. In other words, female humans lose their fertility at some point, where male humans don't, as I understand it. So, you know, you have 100-year-old men fathering babies and 45-year-old women not able to conceive. So, but the lifespan is not all that different between women and men. Women tend to live a little bit longer, but not all that much longer. So it makes sense to me to talk about grandparent hypothesis, but the explanation that was given in the original sort of statement of grandmother hypothesis is that women, you might say, sacrifice their fertility in order to facilitate better survival of their grandchildren.
They subsidize the fertility of their daughters.
Their daughters.
Do you know, Diane, or does anyone know if in hunter-gatherer times, men and women's longevity was similar?
I don't know for sure, but even if it's probably shorter for men, because they do stuff that's generally more dangerous than the stuff that women mostly do, so that they probably die younger, and they have more fights and all that stuff, so they probably die younger on average.
Seems
but
reasonable.
Actually, those average rates don't really tell you much about maximum lifespan.
I think, Hank is frozen. Ken has a hand up, so I think, that means he wants to change.
I just wanted to sort of, consolidate whether we're talking about grandparents or grandmothers.
Okay,
But I'm in favor of talking about both.
okay. Ken,
Okay, well, the thing that's different about grandfathers, of course, is that they don't have menopause. They continue to
Right.
be potent, sort of, perhaps a little Viagra now and then, but they tend to be capable of reproducing offspring. And there's another theory that adds to the grandmother hypothesis, and that's that one of the main reason for menopause may be that they notice that grandmothers who have children, people who have children at a later age, they're less likely to survive than younger children. So therefore, it may be advantageous for them to no longer produce children and therefore invest that way they don't have a weaker child that's competing for the same resources. That's called the reproductional conflict.
yeah, reproductive conflict hypothesis.
Reproductive conflict. So it strikes me that plays a pretty strong role as well. I don't know if we want to say anything about that. I have other things to talk about, but I'll let this go for now.
There was a paper on that talked about the research in Wales, and I just highlighted this in it because I think it's relevant to what you just said. The young whales that lost a grandmother were 4.5 times more likely to die than their peers. That's a pretty, and it is whales, but it's a pretty interesting statistic. Yeah. Other comments?
Well, I was just going to say that, and we're talking specifically about, I believe it was about killer whales, orcas.
Yes.
And they perform both of the same thing goes on with them that goes on with humans. That is, they provide nutritional service to the youngers. They do that, one, by sharing food that they catch, and number two, they become very wise about where to find Chinook salmon, and they tend to be leading the pod, which is filled with young children, more often than men later on, number one. And number two, what else? Yeah, they share food, and they also know where to find it. So they're fulfilling the same roles that, which is why they have. So the question exists. Then there's another article that asks, I'll just toss this out, and you can ignore it, or we can go there, and that's that there's not a whole lot of a difference between elephants and orca whales. I mean, they're large mammals. One's in the sea, one is on land. Yet orcas have menopause. Elephants do not.
Mm-hmm.
And there is a theory that I do not understand about that. And that is that in orcas, I'll just toss this out and then we can go wherever we want to go. Toss out that in orcas, the young males stay in the pod, whereas in elephants, they don't. The young women, the young girls, females stay in the pods, the males leave. And somehow, because that in orcas, because the grandmother is now closer to genetically, somehow that's a tipping point for them to become to have a grandmother effect. And I don't quite understand that. If anyone else read that, I don't know.
Two thoughts real quickly. One is that in that same article that I mentioned a moment ago that talked about the whales, it stresses that grandmothers helping grandchildren is more of a survival benefit for them than helping their own children that they would have late in life. Yes. So that their inclusive fitness is increased more by helping grandchildren than helping their own children if that child is born late in life. And that's one of the explanations for menopause. The other thing, Ken, when you're mentioning, I don't know if this fits with the issue you're raising, but it's one of the criticisms of the grandmother hypothesis is that I believe the research suggests that it's mainly grandmothers helping their daughters, which means that the grandmother and the daughter need to be nearby each other, which means that the society needs to be matrilocal. And the ethnographic studies of human cultures show that only about 30% of human societies are matrilocal. And so that throws a little bit of a monkey wrench into how this would work. And particularly in modern society, many grandparents are very far away from their grandchildren. Hank.
Yeah, I was having some trouble with my technology today, so that's why it took me so long to speak. So breaking tradition. But on the lighter side of things, I had a great illumination yesterday after completing more reading. And even though I grew up in a Jewish family who comes from Europe, I will call my mother's friends and the relatives aunties, like in the Indian continent. And I was always annoyed at my aunties for like, when are you getting married? When are you going to have kids? And I knew enough about being fruitful and multiply, but I said enough already, after a while. And so I realized that they were fulfilling an evolutionary task, even though they weren't grandmothers. And now I sort of, mea culpa, I'm so upset that I didn't understand that they couldn't help it.
So nudging is adaptive, is what you're saying, Hank,
Yes,
right?
it's very adaptive. And so I'm already pleased that we're doing this and all this wonderful reading. And also, I didn't realize I sent the article. Thank you, Steve, for sending it. That Diane, that you sent out a while ago, and I only got to see it last night. I came across it by accident about alloparenting. So I want us to bring that in again. I'm sorry if it came so late, but okay.
Seems to me I read somewhere, it might have been in the Wikipedia entry on the grandmothering hypothesis, that grandmothers, if it's a paternal grandmother, that it results in that their sons tend to have more children rather than more children that survive or something like that. Ken, go ahead. I'll look in my notes for what I'm trying to remember.
Okay, I just wanted to say that, the thought that Hank had, I had too. I don't have an Ashkenazi background, but I did notice that, and I came up with I'm pretty sure a good name for that would be the Yenta hypothesis.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now, what I did want to say is that, I'm not sure what's going on between orcas and elephants. Why wouldn't elephants have why wouldn't they have I had something else I wanted to toss in. Darn, I forgot. Why wouldn't they become no, the other thing I was going to say, yes, that study about matrilocal stuff, again, what it is, that's all a correlation, and you can't draw a causation from correlation. It could be that the daughters who are no longer near their mother left because A, they weren't interested in having grandchildren, B, they were gay. There's not even any mention of that. There's not even any mention of children who might be unwilling to father offspring for whatever reason. Those are just complications.
Let me just quickly read the sentence that I was struggling to say from the Wikipedia entry on this. It states, and there are references cited for this, paternal grandmothers often had a detrimental effect on infant mortality. Also, maternal grandmothers concentrate on offspring survival, whereas paternal grandmothers increase birth rates. These findings are consistent with paternity uncertainty, which is, I think, interesting, since a maternal grandmother with a daughter knows with 100% certainty that grandchild is hers. But with a paternal grandmother, just as with a father, there's paternity uncertainty, which seems to, there's some research which indicates that changes the nudging, the type of nudging that's done. I think. Diane.
Yeah, I had suggested that we should talk about the paternity uncertainty business, especially in terms of matrilocal versus patrilocal societies, but also there's a question about why are so many societies patrilocal? it would seem that kids survive better in the matrilocal societies. But you're saying the birth rates are higher in patrilocal.
Well, based on that one entry, which cites 2 studies in Wikipedia, I don't know if that's definitive, but that's a really good question you're asking, though, Diane. It's a separate issue in a way, but it's related, I guess. Why are so many societies patrilocal? I don't know the answer to that.
And what effect might that have had on human evolution, if it's a very ancient pattern? Is all the animals that we know about have a pattern? The males leave, or the females leave, or everybody mixes up, or whatever. Humans get somebody out, either male or female. In other words, we're exogamous as a group, but who leaves depends very much on the culture.
Rob?
You muted, Rob.
Okay, sorry. I would suggest that the reason we became patrilocal is because of sedentism. Once we settled down in one place and started farming, we had to build houses. And when we built a house that lasted more than a generation, we had to determine the inheritance of the house. So we had to invent private property. And once you start dealing with inheritance, you have to determine as best as possible the paternity for the offspring. And that will lead, I would suggest, to the direct control of female reproduction. And patrilocal societies are better able to do that.
Sounds plausible to me.
But Rob, what's the nature of the control of female reproduction in the patrilocal system? I missed that, or I don't know if you spoke to it. What's the reasoning? I mean, what's the
reasoning is that if you can control the female in your family unit, whether it's a marriage or concubinage or whatever, the more assured you are of the paternity of the children.
Got it.
Increases.
So, and if you can control the paternity of the children, then you can be sure that your children will be, and that's your fitness as a male, will determine the inheritance of the house, and in effect the lands and all of that. But of course, agriculture requires more labor, so you have to have more children, and the more children create a demand for more food, also increase birth mortality, and lots of bad effects. So I'm back to Jared Diamond's suggestion that perhaps agriculture was mankind's worst mistake, but that's another discussion.
Hank, did you want to make a new comment?
Yeah, let me see if I can. Obviously, I'm not an anthropologist, but I've been working with a couple. It's not about the therapy, but one of the members of the couple is from Mali, the male. And so I've been learning about the culture. I've been doing some reading, but I don't know enough about, but the mother or grandmother or auntie has the greatest say.
Do other people hear that?
Yes.
Well, just silence ourselves one by one until it goes away. Oh.
I think that was the Twilight Zone.
Did it go away?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So
think it's something on my computer. I changed the setting. So anyway, go ahead.
Well, I can speak. I don't have to stop. So in what Rob is talking about and the others about the getting it sort of firsthand from the people who've lived there and coming from small villages, the power of I don't know if it's a patrilineal but I believe it's a matrilineal system. But all the curse words have to do with offending your mother. Everything, I can't repeat them because I don't know Mali, but I get the translations. And so I don't know what this has to do with the grandmother hypothesis or the female in the system or matrilocal or matrilineal, but I wondered if anybody has a sense of what the female's effect is, because the curse words are just impressive. I mean, we don't have them. I mean, the most we have is a motherfucker.
I'm not sure how this connects to the grandmother hypothesis.
I'm wondering about the female, and they are grandmothers, and in the context of is matrilineal or patrilineal or patrilocal, the influence of the mother in times, as opposed to it being the brute force of the male, even though there is that and the control. Anyways, that's the best I can do with that. Maybe it's.
Anybody want to take a crack at that?
How about a sideways one, which is to speculate about this alloparenting business. I think patrilocal residence sort of forces children to be more or less totally dependent on their mother, right? Because they have to live in the father's household. How much alloparenting and can go on there? Well, to some extent, maybe there's multiple wives, but they're not necessarily all that friendly to one another. Whereas in more nomadic kinds of groups, like foragers and whatnot, alloparenting seems to be at a much higher level, as Steve, you were explaining, which would mean that there are a lot of female figures in a child's life. So once again, the culture and its economic base has a very determinative effect here.
Let me toss out a topic that's related to all of this that I think might be interesting to talk about. Let's look at this in terms of evolutionary mismatch, which is that for most of human history, alloparenting, whether it was in a matrilocal or patrilocal society, alloparenting was the norm. That it takes a village. That the mothers were not left to care for children without support networks in the way they are in modern society, and for that matter, fathers too. So to the degree that evolution has not shaped us to parent the way we do in at least modern America, there are other modern industrialized democracies that have more institutionalized support systems than we do. But for the most part, you're left to your own devices in America as a mother or father. Is that evolutionary mismatch? What deleterious effects may that have on child rearing, on children, on parents' well-being? What are folks? People probably have their own personal experiences in this regard. I know I do. What are people's thoughts about that? Rob?
I'm familiar with a place in Turkey called Çatalhöyük, which is a Neolithic agglomeration of hundreds of small houses. And I'll go back to the sedentary idea that what changed society dramatically was sedentism. The houses seal you off from your neighbors. Hunter-gatherer bands were it was open. You had a lean-to or a teepee or some kind of temporary shelter as you moved around. But when you settle down and you build these houses, they create a private space that separates you from the other people. So alloparenting becomes more difficult.
Well,
It's
are you familiar with Skara Brae in the Orkney Islands? Because Skara Brae is a Neolithic, sedentary, housing structure, multiple houses, and they're all connected to each other.
yeah, in Çatalhöyük, they're all connected, but they're double walls and there are no windows.
Well,
And of course, the houses are
yeah.
built absolutely flush against each other. And the only opening is in the roof. So people are walking around above you and going down ladders into the houses, but there's no other form of communication, physical communication. So if you can't even hear a child cry from
Well,
one
I'd like
house
to hear. I'd like to hear from the mothers among us. Hopefully, there's more than one. What was it like was there any alloparenting in your experience when you were raising children?
is one I'm familiar with here. So yes.
Oh, I see. Jane, do you want to comment?
Jane.
Oh, Barbara has her hand up.
If I may. But Jane, please.
Go ahead, Barbara.
Okay. Sorry, I'm a little shy because it's first time I will say something. I have an experience being a mother of twins. So twins.
Twins?
Twins, two boys. And it was typical situation. I was left with two babies, being in the flat alone, and it was a very bad experience for me because it was lonely. I couldn't talk to my infants because they couldn't speak. So it was boring and lonely. And I think I just try to change the situation. I moved closer to my mom. So I had some kind of support of my mother and my father. But they weren't so involved because they are more typical Westerners than. But I also decided to get a nanny. And I think it was a perfect choice. So without a nanny, I think I would get crazy. And at that time, I was working part-time.
Right. And of course, that's outside the reach of many mothers economically to be able to pay for the type of support that would have occurred more naturally and organically in the past. And I don't think we even need to go back to hunter-gatherer past. We can think about immigrant communities in large urban areas in America where there was a kind of neighborhood front stoop type of culture where there was a lot of alloparenting, informally at least, that probably went on. Diane, Jane, and then Diane.
No, let Diane go first.
Oh, okay.
Well, I was thinking back to my youth and early motherhood, but it happened in Turkey, and I was a foreigner, but I was also an academic, and I was working full time. And because of the demographics of Turkey at that time, it was fairly cheap to hire help. And so I had a babysitter for all the time that I was at work. But that was it, because we didn't live close to relatives. On the other hand, within Turkish society, at the level of middle class and professional people, very frequently people do live near their relatives, and grandmothers really do a lot of grandmothering here. And so
grandfathers too. I've got 4 grandchildren in my town, and I do a lot of alloparenting, sometimes too much.
Yeah. Well, in Turkish society, there's grandfathers might take an interest, but it's not very systematic. But certainly women who try to work outside the home typically get help from their mothers or their younger sisters or their aunts or this kind of thing. So there's quite a lot of alloparenting that goes on. I think Rob is right that, settled places, and especially the Western pattern of separated farms, means that alloparenting is really restricted to the household. I mean, only the people who are there. On the other hand, Turkish villages, and I think villages in many other parts of the world, are not like American separated farms or like the Scandinavian version of, a farm here and a farm there and a farm over there. All the houses are in a central place and all the fields are in the surrounding area, and people go out into the village for the night, and they go out into the fields to work in the day. And so they're close neighbors, and relatives can live near one another, and alloparenting is much easier than it is in urban areas where people are sort of walled off from one another or in those isolated farms. So once again, there's a huge cultural difference in what's available to people.
Jane?
Folks, I've written a book about it.
Oh,
I have a whole book about it. And
Please send it to the chat.
you know what? I can't send the book to the chat. I don't even know how to do it.
What's the title?
Just the title.
Okay, let me tell you that it has two versions. The first version is The Myth of the Bad Mother, the emotional realities of mothering.
Wow.
And then when the paperback got it, they thought I needed to change the title, which I'm sorry I did, and they put it as The Myth of the Perfect Mother. And this is the worst thing. And then the subtitle was Parenting Without Guilt, which is an absolute, oxymoron. There's no way. I have to tell you, this book was published, I think, in 7 different languages, and in Europe and in Europe, it had a totally different reaction than in the United States. In the United States, not very many people read it. I still get, letters from people in Germany and one from Denmark, but because it just what I wanted to do is I wanted to figure out, why is it so difficult here in America to be a mother? Why is it, there are some cultures that really respect mothering and have very positive feelings toward mothering. And the mother is given some kind of, respect. And here, if you're at a party and you say, well, I'm mothering, I'm staying home, if you're working, you're right, that's fine. Anyway, I just wanted to understand all this, and I did years of research, and I don't know whether the book is any good anymore. I'm afraid to even look at it at this point. But basically, I wanted to know what goes on. Why is it so difficult? And there are lots of reasons. And Barbara, my heart goes out to you, having to be home alone with twins. I don't. It's very, very difficult. And I wanted to know why, because people love their children. I mean, it's like you have a child and you fall in love. There's no doubt about it. But the actual day-to-day, hour-to-hour caring for them stirs up so much stuff. And especially in this country where there's very little alloparenting, and if you're lucky, you have money and you get a nanny or, that sort of thing. But most of the time people are too poor. They have to work. They have to put their kid in a.
Well, Jane, what occurs to me, linking, and I've heard of your book, by the way. I've not read it, but when you said the title, I'm aware of it. I've come across the title somewhere, and not that long ago. I don't really recall where I came across it or why, but when you said the title, I've heard it. But to connect what Barbara said and what Jane said, it seems to me that if you don't have alloparenting available to you, you're going to be exhausted, bored, alone. You're going to feel like a bad mother because you're not supposed to feel those things. So what I wonder, going back to the environmental mismatch idea, is that if I'm a father or a mother, because fathers can have a version of this too, I think. But let's talk about mothers. If you're a mother in a society where you have all this kind of alloparenting, maybe the type of feelings that Barbara was describing never arise in you. Because you're only with your kids part of the time. You're not sleep deprived. You have all this support, so all of the negative feelings never rise to the surface, or at least not as intensely and not as often. So that's how the two might go together. Hank had his hand up for a while.
Jane, were you going to say something?
No, go ahead.
Okay. Let's see. I'll start with my irony, but I'm going to attempt to debunk the idealization of alloparenting. Of course, I'm not, but I think that's how I want to introduce it. So the way I was thinking more is about, and you guys have been bringing it up, and it's about which is the lesser stressor, the nuclear family parenting or community parenting, alloparenting. I thought I'd throw out that question. And the first thing that comes to mind is like, too many cooks spoil the broth or whatever. It's like, how many people are going to tell you how to parent and what's the best way? And, that could drive you nuts too. And it could be even lonelier than on your own. So I bring this up as, for parents.
It's interesting you mentioned that. I was in I'm in the Pro-Social Commons book club for Our Tribal Future. And the second half of that book discusses living in what are called intentional communities, where people decide to live in a communal sort of way. And one of the potential drawbacks I raised in the discussion was exactly what you're saying, is that on the one hand, it would be helpful to have other people around to help take care of your kids. But what if they disagree? What if their ideas about child rearing were really different than yours? What if they thought spanking was okay and you didn't? And so that's a complication. Barbara.
From my point of view, it's a very individualistic way of thinking, right? So if you're from individualistic culture, you think it's a very stressful thing to live in
alloparenting?
Parenting, yes, because there are too many people and it's stressful. But, life is stressful. So there is a choice between loneliness of the mother and how we value the loneliness and the suffering of the mother. Because my story, I am from a little privileged family, so I'm not very poor. But at that time, I wasn't very wealthy, and it was a choice of my husband that he decided that we will live with our nanny in the flat, sharing the same flat with one bathroom. Does not make me crazy. And we were giving her a lot of money because of the twins. It's expensive. And there was a choice of us that we decided that we will spend our money and we will live not a very wealthy life, but it was just the value of my sanity. And I think this is the problem, that we don't see that the mothers are really suffering. I am a therapist. I work mostly with women, with young women, young mothers. And I see the suffering, and I see how it is not seen by the society. I'm from Europe, so we have much more help with kindergartens and help and money and pay leaves and everything, but still the mothers are very lonely, and
Makes me
they
think of
really
the old.
suffer.
You remember the book and the movie Diary of a Mad Housewife? It makes me think about that as you're describing
Know
it.
that, yeah.
Yeah.
But it sounds familiar to be mad.
Diane.
Yeah. Listening to Hank, I thought of what's the opposite of this very private, nuclear family situation for children, and it would be collective child rearing, I suppose. And collective child rearing experiments, whether they have been in kibbutzim, for example, in Israel, or to some extent in the early Soviet Union, as some communal experiments have not also worked very well. In other words, people don't like for their children to be everybody's child. They want contact with their own child. I mean, I think this is perfectly predictable from the point of view of inclusive fitness.
Yeah.
That you would be attached to your own children in a way that you're not attached to everybody else's children, and vice versa. But that's not the same thing as alloparenting. Alloparenting is help for the mother. I mean, the mother is recognized as the mother, the child recognizes mother as his or her mother, and so forth. But other people help, other people respond. I think there's pretty good evidence that it makes quite a bit of difference in the personality development of children to have a lot of adult or semi-adult figures, older sisters, cousins, and so on and so forth, who are responsive to you when you're young. It gives, I think, they say hunter-gatherer children are more independent, more self-reliant, and so forth, probably more self-secure, we might say. So there's some point between total isolation and total collective rearing of children that's probably the sweet spot.
Good distinction, Diane. Very helpful. Ken?
Well, I just wanted to say that I just Googled it, and there are 270 kibbutzim in Israel. So not sure that communal child rearing is dying out.
No, but they don't do it anymore. They don't do it that way anymore.
They don't separate the children from the families, I don't think, anymore.
Yeah, they don't separate the babies from the families.
Oh, well, what is the structure of a kibbutz nowadays then?
Well, it allows for more privacy for families than the original version.
Bettelheim wrote about it. He was very critical of the early kibbutzim care of children.
It has a kind of Brave New World quality to it when you think about collective parenting, which is, I agree, collective parenting is different than alloparenting. One is a totally different child rearing model. The other is helping the current child rearing model, which is different, I think. Hank?
Just in the article on alloparenting, these were written, I think, by a neurobiologist, or I don't know if you remember what the people, what their background.
The one that you had me post the link to, yes.
Yeah, and the one that Diane sent. And what they talk about is, they do this with the animals, with moles and other prairie moles and other creatures. They don't, and what they talk about in the, is the, they do the blood tests and they do some scans. I don't know how they work out, but they find out that when the mother has a break, talking about stress, however she gets the break, she's more able to produce oxytocin, receive oxytocin, and all the other hormonal systems. So I would say the other one I say is there's been a lot more literature, and I couldn't find it today, about the flaws of the nuclear family around. And I don't remember it. I came across it a while ago, and I'll look for it and I'll try to find a way to send it. But
does anybody know if and I know we're starting to run the clock out here, but does anybody quickly know from anthropology, the hunter-gatherer tribes, is there postpartum depression in hunter-gatherer tribes? Does that exist?
I find it very unlikely.
I
I would-
find it very likely.
Likely.
I find it likely mainly because there, at least in the beginning, you have, there's a biochemical kinds of things happen
Yep.
that cause depression. And also if somebody is nursing a baby, when you stop nursing, you can become very depressed.
So if it's a biological cause, it would exist if it's more of a cultural cause. Okay. Get it.
These are biological causes. I want to
Okay.
say that one of the two things that I found. One thing that I found was that at least with American mothers, there's a lot of competition, and so it often mothers were not terribly supportive of each other. There was competition, and I don't know. It was difficult. I found it mothers experiencing difficulty getting comfort from other mothers, although some were saved. They'd have one other mother that had a kid, or one or two, and their child rearing was wonderful for them because they had support. And
Well, Jane, it's interesting you mentioned that. There's a wonderful comedy on Netflix right now. It's an Australian comedy. The name eludes me, but it's about a mother having her first child. And in several of the early episodes, she goes to a mother's support group.
Yes.
Yeah.
And what happens is basically they're all competing with each other
Exactly.
to be the better mother rather than supporting each other.
Yeah, that happens, and then there's not a competition, but trouble between mothers that stay at home and mothers who work.
Yep.
They can't seem to support each other at all. But I also want to say that some research, there's tremendous pleasure in mothering. Tremendous emotional, the physical closeness, that sort of thing, so that they're, just as mothering, the day-to-day, hour-to-hour can be really, really difficult. The intense pleasure and
right. One would hope evolution shaped those feelings, or we'd be in trouble as a species.
Exactly.
In the interest of time, I'm going to just close by wrap this up by just telling you my favorite joke about grandparents. Some of you may know this, but it's very short. Do folks know why grandchildren and grandparents get along so well? Does anybody know? It's because they share a common enemy. So with that, I think we should turn it back to Sage to kind of wrap things up.
Thanks, Steve.
And by the way, Barbara and Jane, nice to see you here. I hope you could return.
please.
Yes, thank you. It's such a wonderful group. I'm really
It's
happy.
wonderful. Yeah.
Good. Okay. Well, we all have the link now, and it's the same one, so you can write it down. And I posted it on the Hilo as well, but you'll find the same link over and over again with every month. We write a new topic, but the link will be the same. So I will just end the recording now, and then I'm just going to leave open the room. Anyone?
Sage, what about the next month's topic? How are we choosing that?
Well, we can, here, I'll pause this for